Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is the third stream that I've done in a kind of format where that I'm doing. I don't know what format this is, but um, as I said in my first stream, I'd been thinking about streaming. I've seen a lot of people stream lately. I've seen a lot of different streams, and I'm for me, it's a great way to pass the time and to also avoid my fears. And so I thought, why not start my own stream and start streaming? Um, the question is this a good idea? And is this going to be helpful to myself and others? um, I'm not sure about that. I've heard AJ say something to the effect, now, this isn't a quote so much as a paraphrase, and it might not even be a paraphrase. Um, but I've heard something to the effect that uh, anytime you avoid a fear, you create an addiction. So you engage in an addiction. Um, so, by the very fact of myself doing this stream, I might be just engaging in an addiction. And you yourself, by spending a lot of time watching a stream that may not be beneficial for yourself, you may be engaging in addiction. So I'll leave that there as a disclaimer. I don't know how far I'm going to go with these kinds of streams, but I wanted to do it earlier. I felt the desire to do it, and so here I am. Um, Today, I have a beautiful bowl of zucchini soup. That right there is gochujang. I need to properly mix it into the soup. It's some red cayenne pepper paste from Korea. It's very delicious. Adds a little kick to your dishes. I got this wonderful vegetarian uh, potato soup from Aldi. Aldi is a German brand that was taken over by the sons of the original owner, and one son took it in one direction, and another son took it in another direction with two separate companies. And when they came to the United States, one son called their company Aldi, and the other son called their company Trader Joe's. So that's an interesting tidbit for you all. I love Aldi because I'm addicted to cheapness, but I also find that they're very efficient, and I feel like I can get away that way with being cheap because part of the way that they keep their costs down is by being very efficient. You'll see what I mean if you ever decide to visit an Aldi. Um, I want to say really quick that um, for myself, when I cook, um, if I want a fresh vegetable, a lot of times pre-made food or processed food won't have fresh vegetables. So what I do is I often add something processed to something that I just cut up and usually sautéed, which I believe is just putting a little bit of water in a pan and cooking, or boil, where you just immerse the vegetables or whatever you're cooking in water and you boil until you're ready to eat it. Um, I find that to be a very quick and simple way to make delicious meals. It takes some time away from spicing up a meal. I don't know much about spicing up food. For me, I have some staples like, well, lemon pepper. I've got some Parmesan cheese back there and some adobo seasoning, which I love. Goya adobo. It starts with a base of garlic, black pepper, oregano, and turmeric, I believe. And then this one adds cumin. And they have like 6 or 7 different adobos with different things. One of them I think has sassafras. But what I do is I just, put some different things together, and then I add my staples. And I also add hot sauce, typically some kind of something hot. I like hot stuff, so yeah, it's not too exciting necessarily, but I find that that's an easy way to cook a decent meal is to add something from the store to some freshly cut vegetables that you cook up. So yeah, there's that. Just a suggestion. I thought I'd have a long stream, um, but I actually really enjoy this food over here, and I think I'm going to try and get to that pretty quick. So I think that this stream is going to be pretty short. Also, I don't believe I have any viewers. I want to make a call out again saying that if you would like to join the discussion and ask a question or leave a comment that might direct the discussion in a certain way, you can do so. I'm actually very afraid of people actually watching me live. I'm very afraid of people being nasty towards me, um, attacking me, and by attack, I mean a whole bunch of different things. So, for the moment, I have my handy dandy. Right now, I'm using a letter to cover the amount who cover the amount of people who are watching, so I don't see who's watching, if anybody. I kind of feel more at ease and more comfortable by not knowing if anybody's watching me. If I don't know, then I don't have to deal with that fear, I suppose. At some point, I might just get rid of that altogether and just be more fine with knowing who's watching me, or not who, but how many. Um, it's a crazy thing to be afraid of, but there it is. Um, Sometimes I'll just I do this a lot. If I'm nervous, I'll just like take something and mess with it. A lot of times, I'm sure other people do this. Take a remote and they'll open up the battery part and they'll close it. In this case, I've got a tin can, which I don't know what to do with yet. So, as you can tell, I'm nervous, but gotta find something to touch, something to Um, yeah, yeah. But the fact that it seems that there's not a lot of interest in these streams would also kind of encourage me to keep this short. And there's other things I want to get to. So all of that makes me think I want to have kind of a shorter stream. But I can talk at length. I can be loquacious, and I very well might be. I might let this delicious food go cold and just go on for a bit. So we'll see. But I do want to be a little more Spartan with I shall return. Hey there, I'm back. I apologize. One of my housemates just came home, and um, I left some things on the table. And actually, to be fully honest, I was ashamed of some of the things I left on the table, including this pastry, which I always hide my food. I don't know how other sugar addicts do it, but for me, being away from people is part of the whole game because I don't want to experience judgment. So I try to avoid judgment, and so I try to limit whose eyeballs can see the food that I have. Anyway, um, if I feel disturbed enough by my housemates, even though they're in different rooms and whatever, different parts of the house, I might just end the stream early for that reason too, because yeah, I get very afraid of what people think about what I'm saying. So it's funny because people think that I'm an honest person, and I think I'm showing here that I'm not as honest as you might think. Because what's probably going to happen here on this stream is I'm going to tailor my words more than I normally would. I'm going to tailor what I'm going to say based on who I think might hear what I have to say. So, and isn't that what we're doing a lot of the time? Don't we fail to be honest just because we are afraid of what people will think of us if we say something out of kilter, or what will be the reaction of other people? So yeah, but as I was saying before I left for that brief moment, um, I want to be a little more Spartan with my topics today. I actually have a lot to talk about, and I want to get to them and try to stay on point as much as possible. So I'm going to attempt to do that. So the goals for this stream are to talk about the following: um, fear, terror. I want to talk about a recent fear event that I have, and I want to talk about my thoughts on finances and financial scheming, financial planning, etc., etc. So that's the plan, to talk about those topics, and hopefully we can stay on point. I also have to apologize. I hope this doesn't make too much noise when I wrestle this little letter here. Um, I I might get a better setup at some point, but I think that's pretty far away. Um, yeah. So I want to talk about fear. Where do I start? Fear is an emotion. I would call it a dark emotion. Um, AJ has referred to it as a sinful emotion. Um, and and the context of that is sin for AJ, for the one of the teachers of the Divine Truth teachings, is missing the mark of love. If you look at one of the original definitions of sin, it means to miss the mark, and AJ often describes sin in that way. So sin would be anything that isn't love. You might say it's the opposite to love, but um, yeah, it's not love. And I think we're all fairly acquainted with the emotion of fear because, believe it or not, we experience it all the time. I just started out this stream talking about different feelings, different scenarios in which I felt fear, and it's ongoing. I feel fear right now. I'm kind of pushing it down a little bit, but I do, I'm kind of reminded that I have it. So, yeah, I have it. Fear is one of the more interesting and more powerful discussions. It's in the Divine Truth teachings, I would say. I know I've been looking into it a fair bit lately, and I find it very interesting. Uh, yeah, as I said, we're all very acquainted with fear, and I think the prevalence of fear in our lives is not truly appreciated. I can say for myself that I definitely don't appreciate how often and how deeply I experience fear. But beyond that, I also don't appreciate something that AJ has said, which is that in our soul, we have, in this world as it is, we have amassed a great deal of fear. We store the emotion of fear in our soul. And what is your soul? According to AJ, it's something, it is in fact who you are. You are a soul. You're more a soul than you are a physical body. You're more a soul than you are a spirit body. In fact, you're not more than, you are a soul. That's who you are. And I was very struck when I heard AJ say and declare, you know, for me, it was a declaration, call it high on the hills. For him, it was just something that he said. It's a minor thing, but for me, it was a big deal when he described the soul being who you are, and then going on to say that these two bodies are created at the time that you incarnate on the earth. One body is the spirit body, and the other body is the physical body. And he went on to say that these two bodies are appendages, kind of like your arms or your legs. And that stuck to me to this day. I find that very, very fascinating. What does that mean? Um, it means that the spirit and physical bodies are extensions of you. They're kind of like, tools. They're like if your forearm is your soul, your spirit body may be the palm of your hand or whatever this part is called, and then your physical body are the fingers. Or if your soul is your body, or like your torso and head, let's say, then your spirit body are like your arms and your legs, and then your physical body are the hands and your feet, or something. There's the main part of you, and then there's the rest of you, and the parts of you that you use to do other things. And I find that to be, yeah, again, I'm just repeating myself, but I find that to be extremely fascinating. And to think about that, to contemplate it, is a very powerful activity. But how to think about my soul, um, or how to think about emotions locked up in my soul, it's hard for me to think about that. Um, I will say that there are moments in my life that where I experience my fear, and AJ would say that there's a lot of fear inside that comes out in the moments of your day. Throughout your life, you are experiencing these emotions that you have stored in your soul, and they're popping up. They're popping up out of you, and in all kinds of different circumstances and events in your day to day life, in your moment to moment life and experience. So I hope I'm making myself clear. It's not that um, you have a fear and it's normal. It's not that you see a bear in the woods and you have fear and that's normal. That's not normal. That is there because at some point, probably in your childhood, you had love removed from an interaction that you had with someone. most likely one of your parents, but it could have been others as well. Um, we are a sponge of emotions, and when we um, experience an unloving emotion, we begin to tear up because it's painful. And when we experience an unloving emotion and we experience pain, we try to immediately eliminate that pain. But what ends up happening is that other events are stacked upon that. For instance, a mother might baby, or a father might baby their child when they're experiencing their pain, when they're crying. And in so doing, they're attempting to stop that important emotional release from occurring. And that becomes a layer on top of that core emotion of grief that you're trying to experience. So I hope you can appreciate the difference here. Fear is not normal. You know, if you think it's normal, then maybe reconsider. I don't know for sure. As I said, I don't fully appreciate that there are a lot of emotions stored up in my soul, but it's kind of an idea that I am working with and playing with. Um, yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of what I want to say about fear. It's not supposed to be there. And the other thing that happens with fear is addictions are used to avoid fear. So not only do we have this deep core emotional pain, which you might call sadness or grief, but we also have fear as a cover to that emotional pain that keeps us from feeling the pain. So you have this core emotional pain and a big um, uh, bank vault, you might say, you know, is created. A hard, um, you know, I'm not sure this is the proper analogy, but let's just go with it. A hard metal vault is created, and all the pain is put away in that big vault, and then it's locked, and the turnstile or whatever is turned, and your pain is locked away in that vault. And that vault is fear. And every once in a while, a little vapor of sadness tries to creep out of that vault, but um, we yeah, I'm getting this is something that happens to me a lot where I get lost in my analogy. Has that ever happened to you? I'm not a very good analogy maker. For all my writing and creative acumen, I'm pretty bad at analogies. So before I get lost in the analogy any further, let me just say very simply that there's the core emotion of uh, sadness, and over that is fear, and over that we use addictions, which are like active um, work, or yeah, it's basically activity in the world that we do to avoid the feeling of fear. And that could be, you know, engaging one of the obvious physical addictions, of which there are many, you know, from gambling to, you know, calling up a friend when you're sad or frightened, to posting on a forum online, to grabbing your cell phone and scrolling through a random social network, to eating food, which is an addiction that I do. I would even say that popping pimples, which is something that I've done, is an addiction. And also, um, I get these little things on my head that I try to scrape off. I don't know if it's like dandruff or little things that fall into the pockets of my pores, and I just like um, scrape it away, and I'll get into a state where I'm just scraping these things away for like 5, 10 minutes, and I think that's a way for me to get away from my fear. It's a very little activity that I do to escape my fear. So yeah, there's a lot of different physical things that we do, but um, there are also emotional addictions that we're always engaging in. And I've also heard that physical addictions are always emotional addictions because it's always everything is emotional. But an emotional addiction might be trying to tell a joke to diffuse a tense situation. Let's say there's a tense situation at a party. Someone makes an off color comment, and another person looks very offended, and maybe a fight might ensue. So you come back with a clever remark in hopes of diffusing the situation. But what's interesting is that everyone is having their own different experience of that event. And instead of allowing people to experience what they will experience, you try to stop people from experiencing that with a humorous remark. Um, so I know that humor can be a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but um, it can be a bad thing. It can be used inappropriately, just like you can use a knife to cut some zucchini, or you can use a knife to stab somebody. So So there are a lot of emotional addictions. An emotional addiction could be falling into the arms of a lover, and again, that can be a great thing, but it can also be a way to avoid your fear. So anytime you're avoiding your fear, you are engaging in an addiction. So for myself, I've experimented. The reason why I'm interested in fear more lately is that I've been experimenting with going against my addictions, dropping an addiction, and then feeling how I feel. And interestingly, often I don't immediately feel fear, but it can kind of creep up on me. Sometimes I do feel fear, but I quickly bat it away. And I think what I'm doing is I'm batting it away with another addiction. Um, but like for instance, like going off sugar for a while. Like in early November, I went off sugar for like a week and a half, and it was pretty great. I felt pretty good. But then over time, I noticed a lot of fear was creeping up, and I didn't want to feel that fear. So I started looking more into this and kind of praying more about it and talking more about it because I realized that, and this is something that AJ has said too, that you can't get rid of an addiction unless you feel the fear that lies underneath it. So I I realized that it's kind of uh, pointless to stop an addiction and just try to use my willpower without feeling the fear underneath because apparently even if I stop one addiction entirely, like I could stop eating food and I can stop being a portly man, but I could go to something else and have problems from that. So I can go from eating a lot of food to gambling, or eating a lot of food to being a sexaholic or whatever. So there you go. So I wanted to deal with my fear, and it's interesting because to bring all this home, it's interesting that I still try valiantly, like with great enthusiasm. I try to avoid fear. I avoid fear at all costs. I and that's one thing that's very powerful. Sorry, I just felt a little emotional there, but I'm deciding I don't want to feel my tears. I don't want to do that right now. But one thing that you have to say in if you want to like grow yourself and take the divine love path with which I'm not necessarily saying that I'm taking because Yeah, for different reasons. But what you have to do is you have to be honest about where you're at and what you want. So, for someone like myself that is always thinking about how to improve myself, instead of saying, I want to improve myself, it's important for me to say, I don't want to improve myself, if that's what the truth is. And the way to find out what the truth is to notice if you are improving yourself. If you're smoking a cigarette and you say, I want to stop smoking cigarettes, I hate cigarettes, and then you take another puff, um, you have to understand that you're being dishonest with yourself and the rest of the world and God. You don't actually want to stop smoking. You don't actually hate cigarettes. In fact, you love cigarettes. You engage in smoking regularly, and it's because you want to. And it's not to judge yourself, but it's important to own the truth. That's really important, and I think for just the simple reason that if you don't see that, if you can't say that you're using your own desire to engage in activity like smoking or any other addiction, if you cannot see that you're using your own free will and desire, then you're removing yourself from the truth of the situation. It's like that old saying of the first step is to admit the problem. That's what's happening when you own your desire. When you own your desire to do something unloving, you are admitting to the problem. So you're taking that first step. So it's a very powerful and beautiful thing. And you know, in public, because people are so judgmental, um, it's important. Well, it's not important necessarily. Many people will create these, loving spaces like addiction counseling, or there's a lot of churches that deal with people who deal with addicts and people who are addicts to be more PC. And the whole idea is to create a loving environment to allow somebody to admit those things. It's all about creating a judgment-free zone. But I think, a lot of times those environments are not the most conducive, and people can be, creating other addictions in place of the addictions that they're trying to solve. But the point is that there's a lot of judgment for people being open, upfront, and honest about what they are struggling with. And that's a shame. That's something that we could really change in our culture. Instead of attacking and judging someone that is honest about an unloving desire that they have, we can appreciate that they have the courage to tell the truth and root for them to, um, you know, work on that thing and hold them to account and trust God and the way that God created our souls, that they can use the our God given natural ability to change. And how do you change? It's very simple. In the case of fear, you just have to feel it. And so that's kind of where I'm going with all of this. I find it difficult to feel my fear, and I also don't believe that I can feel my fear. I find it difficult to see it when it comes up, even though it's coming up all the time. And I've been thinking about fear a lot lately. I think in my last stream, I talked a lot about fears that I had and parts of myself that are very ugly. And I want to do that because I want to be more open and honest about those things. Um, I don't see AJ and Mary being very open about some of their faults. So I sort of suspect that they don't do it because it might be an emotional addiction to put all your problems on display, to talk about your problems in a public forum or with other people instead of just dealing with your fear, just feeling your fear. It could very well just be an addiction, and that goes back to me wondering and questioning whether these streams are of any use or good for myself or other people. Because if I'm only just talking about my fears and I'm not actually wanting to experience them, then I'm not going anywhere and I'm not helping anybody. So that is a question that I'm going to deal with moving forward. But for right now, I'm not going to just shut down this stream. I don't hear my housemates in the background, and I do feel that I'm on a bit of a flow here talking about these things. So I do feel good about continuing, and I will continue. So all this brings me back to a recent event that occurred, and it was very striking for me. It happened only yesterday. Um, I moved down to Abilene. I lived with someone for 2 weeks, and then I moved to this location, which is um, a house that I've been in for about a month now, so thereabouts. And I'm wondering if